Excellencies, distinguished guest participants, we're about to begin our event. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A very good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today, and we are delighted to welcome you to the beautiful Islamic Center Campus 4 of Universitas Al-Madahlan. Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alamin, wa bihi nasta'inu ala umuri dunya waddin, wa salatu wa salamu ala asrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Amma ba'du. Distinguished guests and participants, I would like to welcome all of you to Notion CONFAB 13 on Literature and Linguistics in Cultural Practice, presented by the English Literature Department of Faculty of Literature, Culture, and Communication of Universitas Al-Madahlan. I am Rizky Aida, your MC for today, and I would like to extend a warm welcome to the Dean of the Faculty of Literature, Culture, and Communication of Universitas Al-Madahlan, Bapak Wajaran PhD, the Head of English Literature Department of Universitas Al-Madahlan, Bapak Dr. Andes Muftakian MHum, lecturers of English Literature Department of Universitas Al-Madahlan, our moderator, Ibu Ida Puspita, SSMRS, our distinguished guest lecturers, Mr. Alex Masardo, Mrs. Maria Meredith, Mr. Aris Tibe, Mrs. Helen Moore, Mrs. Charlotte Taylor, and Mrs. Hilary Wicks, and also all participants. Once again, welcome to Universitas Al-Madahlan. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to proceed our event to the next agenda. To start, we will have a welcoming speech by the Dean of the Faculty of Literature, Culture, and Communication of Universitas Al-Madahlan, Bapak Wajaran PhD. The stage is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Mr. Alex Masardo, and then Ibu Maria Meredith from the Gloucestershire University, United Kingdom, and then Papa Maftohin, Master of Humanera, as the head of English Literature Department, Bapak Ibu dosen di Sastra Inggris, and all participants from the semester 6 of English Literature Department Universitas Al-Madahlan. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Arsala rasulahu bil huda wa dinil haq liyudhhirahu ala dini kullih. Asyhadu an la ilaha illallah wa asyhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Thank to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because of his blessing we can be here in a very good condition. First of all, as the Dean of the Faculty of Literature, Culture and Communication, or we call as FSBK, that's quite difficult, I think, FSBK, I would like to welcome you to our faculty, even you have already been here about 2 weeks. Welcome to the Faculty of Literature, Culture and Communication, especially to the Department of English Literature. I do hope you are enjoying your visit and also your sharings to our students. We are being honored and also very happy to have you as our esteemed guests from the University of Gloucestershire, United Kingdom. As this might be your first time coming to our faculty, I would like to inform you that the Faculty of Literature, Culture and Communication has around 3,000 students, or approximately about 3,200 students. And then we have 3 departments. The first one is English Literature Department, and then Indonesian Literature Department, and the third one is Communication Study. We are so happy to have the opportunity, yeah, to collaborate with the University of Gloucestershire from the UK, and I thank you very much. Also, you are doing project in the Faculty of Education, but we are very glad that you want to share your knowledge and your expertise to our students. I do hope that this collaboration will be continued with various activities in the near future, like maybe join seminar and then research collaboration and also visiting professor in the near future. As the Dean of the Faculty of Literature, Culture and Communication, yeah, I apologize if you find something inconvenient during your visit to our faculty. And oh yeah, once again, I thank you for your visit, your sharing of your knowledge, and also your willingness, yeah, to collaborate with us. And then the last one, I also want to thank to Ibu Ida Puspita, who has the initiation of this collaboration, and Pak Mahpuhin, Master of Human Error, as the head of English Literature, for organizing these activities. I think this seminar or this guest lecture is very important for our students because most of them are doing, almost doing, yeah, the last project of the study, yeah. I think that's all my speech. Once again, thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Ladies and gentlemen, and all participants, we move on to the signing of the collaboration implementation document between the English Literature Department of Universitas Ahmad Dahlan and the University of Gloucestershire. We kindly invite the head of English Literature Department, Bapak Maftuhin M. the Dean of FSPK, Bapak Wajidan PhD, and also the representative of the University of Gloucestershire, Mr. Alex Masardo, to come forward. Everyone, please give a round of applause. All right, ladies and gentlemen, and all participants, now we come to the main session, which is the discussion with guest lecturers. All presentations and discussions will be moderated by Ibu Ida Puspita SSMRS, a lecturer at English Literature Department of Universitas Andalan. Ibu Ida is also the head of Office of International Affairs of Universitas Andalan. Let us welcome our moderator, Ibu Ida Puspita SSMRS, to come forward.
Terima kasih. Cek. Okay. Right, so thank you, Rizky, for the introduction. But I'd like to clarify one thing, that I'm not anymore as the head of International Office of Universitas Andalan. I used to be, but in February 2024, my responsibility as the head of International Office has already terminated, and it's been delivered to a new structure. So, but anyway, thank you very much, Rizky. Rizky is one of our students, a very brilliant student, so always become our master of ceremony today. Alex and Maria, once again, welcome to Universitas Andalan for the second time. Your first time was in 2023, January 2024. But since you, last time you had a very wonderful experience here, and you couldn't wait to come back here again. So welcome back to Yogyakarta. And here we have 200 students of English Literature Department, quite many. Because as informed by our dean, that we have quite many students in Faculty of Literature, Culture and Communication. I will be your moderator. Hopefully I'm quite moderating. That's why they asked me to do that. And I promise to introduce you very short, mahasiswa, adik-adik, anak-anakku. So we have one thing that we need to learn here is a cross-cultural understanding, that usually we introduce the speakers in a very long CV. But that's our habit, our culture. That's good for some point, but for another point, I think we need to make it very short. So I promise to only give like 3 sentences of each of you. So Alex Masardo is used to be, I think, you used to be the academic subject leader, or it is equivalent with head of department, like Pak Maftukin, for early years and education. In here we have PG PAUD, pendidikan guru anak usia dini. So it's very similar. Early childhood education in University of Gloucestershire, and he also held the academic positions at the Universities of Bath and Birmingham, and visiting and honorary fellowships at the Center for the Analysis of Social Policy and Center for the Study of Global Ethics. And Maria Meredith is a senior lecturer at University of Gloucestershire, UK. It's not easy to pronounce University of Gloucestershire. It took me like a year, So sometimes people say University of Gloucestershire, but actually it should be, hopefully I'm not wrong, University of Gloucestershire, right? Okay. So University of Gloucestershire, UK, Her research interests mostly lie at the intersection of education and psychology, exploring factors influencing a range of outcomes within educational experiences and professional identities. Her current research explores student belonging, resilience, family support in relation to education, inclusion within early childhood education, and collaborative online international learning. So what is to do with literature? Today we are going to hear their perspective on how is the relationship between literature and education in their own expertise. Alex will be delivering on children literature because his expertise is in childhood education. And Maria will be delivering on the folktale, probably, yeah, identity, and also children education, early childhood education. And I knew Alex and Maria 1 or 2 years ago when we had a bid with British Council. And later on, we will be having 4 other speakers but they will join us online from University of Gloucestershire, UK. And I know them because of Alex. So students, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Alex and Maria. Please. The slide will be assisted by the operator. Are you ready? Okay, right.
So hello everybody. Just before the slides come up, I would just like to thank the Dean of the Faculty of Literature, Culture and Communication, Pak Wajiran, also to Pak Maf, Pak Adjar, Rizi as well, and of course Buida, who I've now known for several years. And I must say that it's a real privilege to be here embedded within your university, embedded within your culture, thinking about the types of research collaborations we can do together with your staff, but also with you as students. We've been working with our students in the Faculty of Teacher Training and Education and providing them with an opportunity to work cross-culturally in virtual spaces. So I do genuinely believe that this is a very powerful means of exchanging ideas, exchanging knowledge, and so on. So I'm very happy to be here. So I am the warm-up act. I don't know if you know that term, but I don't sit within the Department of English Literature. So what I'm going to do is provide a warm-up act for the real speakers who are from the English Literature Department. But I do sit in education with Bu Maria, and so there is a lot of crossover. And what I'm going to talk to you about, English, yes, literature and children's literature in particular. It's going to be just a whistle-stop tour. I don't know if you know that expression, but it means I've got to keep it very short. I only have about 15 minutes and maybe 5 minutes for questions. So if I could have the first slide, please. Oh, just the first, if you go back one. Okay, why have I put this slide up? Okay, so I must start by saying that I love my job. And why do I love my job? Because I get opportunities like this, which are quite unusual, to actually reflect on some of the influences in my own life in terms of literature. Now, this was a book I read, or was read to me, perhaps, when I was about 3 or 4 years old. So it reminds me very much of my grandparents and my grandmother in particular. And she read me this book, and it's stayed with me all these years. It's just one of many, but I thought I'd put it up to just really remind us all of the power of literature and how things can stay with you. If I could have the next slide, please. So this book tells the story of a little old man and a little old lady, and they lived in a nice, clean house which had flowers all around it, except where the door was, but they couldn't be happy because they were very lonely. So what happens is the little old man goes in search of a cat for a pet, and he finds a cat, but then he sees another cat which looks even more beautiful, and so he takes that cat, and then he sees another one which is even more beautiful, and then he wants to take them all, and eventually he ends up seeing hundreds of cats, thousands of cats, millions and billions and trillions of cats. So can you see how the rhythm or the music, if you like, of the literature can really help to inspire a young person? Why do we like to sing songs? We like to sing songs because we can hear the rhythm, and it does something to us inside that we can that we internalize and carry with us. So rhythm in literature is very important. You might have heard in your studies of iambic pentameter, that sort of metrical rhythm, and it's can be particularly helpful. If I could have the next slide, please. Thank you. So before I go any further, we're talking about children's literature. And we're thinking about the context of childhood. But of course, children's literature can be very important to read for adults. Perhaps, for example, if an adult has a cognitive learning issue, we know that from the research from, for example, Doddle, Feder and Tamir, for example, that reading narrative children's texts can be a helpful tool for developing social cognitive skills among adults in supporting, and that is supported in the research literature. I put up this image of a man reading to an elderly woman, and she has dementia. So you can, I think when we're working with adults with dementia, for example, reading old-style books that might bring them back to their childhood. We know that, we know that with, for example, Alzheimer's and dementia, people can remember things from when they were very young, but their short-term memory is very short. So things like children's literature can bring back sort of memories and help with that cognitive process, if you like. So I just wanted to set the wider context of children's literature. If I could have the slide, please. So here, the role of text and illustration. Like I said, this is a whistle-stop tour, so I'm just going to just give you a few sort of ideas and a brief sort of outline. So when we think about children's literature, we also need to think about the relationship between the text and perhaps the visual nature of children's literature, the pictures that can accompany the text. So again, one of my favorite books from when I was little was this book by Angela Banner. And it was about a little ant and a little bee, and they lived together and they had lots of very exciting adventures together. So the first ant and bee book that I read was called Around the World with Ant and Bee. And Bee had lost his umbrella. It had blown away in the wind. And so Ant and Bee go to all around the different countries in the world to try and find Bee's umbrella. Now, when I was about 5 years old, I had no idea about the outside world, that there were different countries and so on. But this book gave me an introduction, you can see, to literally all the different continents. And again, it's something that stayed with me and potentially, I would argue, gave me a wanderlust or a thirst to travel and explore the world. This was all from a very from a child's book. So again, there's a real power in children's literature that we should be thinking as English literature students, that you should be thinking about. So illustrations illustrations add a multi-layered richness and depth to the author's words. And images can leave a more lasting impression in young learners' minds than text does, but it can also serve as a very valuable teaching tool. Now, why have I said this in my very short presentation? How long have I got left? I'm okay. Why have I said this? Because I'm going to give you an example here. A lot of the speakers that you will hear from today, for example, Aaron Stibbe, also Helen Moore, a lot of their work is revolves around sustainability, and so on, and ecological issues. And so it can serve as a valuable teaching tool around issues such as environmental sustainability. So if I could have the next slide, please. So education for sustainability. Well, early childhood literature and education storybooks can have a range of benefits, and I'm just going to take you through about 4 of them. If you're interested, of course, you can follow up. There are some references here, but I just want to point out what may be some of the 4 key ones. So if I could have the first one. It can enhance the child's vocabulary. It can give them a framework within which to set their ideas. They may have a feeling about something, but not be able to express it. So these can give us words, terms that we can use. I think there's an important thing I wanted to tell you, and that is that words don't just describe reality, they create the reality. So the words that we use, the terms that we use, are incredibly important, and they need to be thought of, and terms do change over time. For example, Maria and I both work in inclusion, special educational needs and disability. That was the project we had with our colleagues here at UAD. And the terms that we use in the UK now have changed dramatically just over the last sort of 20, 30 years, because they can change the way that we conceptualize and frame a particular issue. So I think it's important to bear that in mind. If I could have the next one, please. They offer character education tools. Now, this is incredibly important. While we're here, we've also been liaising with the mathematics department. And last time I was here in January, I was very privileged to meet Pak Hardy, who is a professor here at UAD in mathematics, and Bunofi, who also works in the mathematics department. And we are thinking about putting in funding to do some research using mathematics, but as a way to, but combined with character education. And yesterday, was it yesterday or 2 days ago, Maria and I and Pak Hardy and Bunofi, we sat down together and we worked in what I would like to call a sand pit, like a children's, with the sand, but instead of sand, we were throwing ideas around, and we thought, oh, why don't we have a series of characters that are drawn like a children's book into the maths textbook that can show the unity, the diversity of different views and cultures and ways of seeing a particular maths problem through the medium of storytelling. So again, character education tools, very important. If I could have the next one. They can enable children to make intertextual connections. So what I mean by that is making links between one text and another. Again, very, very important. I won't spend too long on each, otherwise I'll run out of time. So the next one. Okay, eliciting emotions. Now, I don't know this, but I would hazard a guess that everybody in this room will, when they have been a child, will have read a book which will have touched them and perhaps even made them cry or made them laugh. Certainly I have. I remember, in fact, my last slide is of a book called, it's a French book called Le Petit Prince. I don't know if you know it, by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, but it was something, I think I read it when I was 13, and I was staying with my grandmother and my grandfather, and they left it just in the bedroom on the side. And I read the book by myself, and I did cry at the end because it moved me and touched me so much. And I was 13 years old at the time. So again, children's stories can have a really powerful way to elicit emotions. And then the final one. They can be a springboard to place-based embedded learning. Now, as English literature students, this might be a very interesting concept for you to pursue. I know you're coming to the end of your studies, but some of you, I hope, will be going on to take master's degrees, perhaps even do PhDs. And this might be something that some of you want to think about. If I could have the next slide, please. So, place-based education is a pedagogical approach, and it emphasizes the connection between a learning process and the physical place in which teachers and students are. So in the UK, we have something called forest schools, where we take children out to be out in nature and and learn. There are lots of theories about this, biofilial theory, for example, and so on. But it can be a very powerful tool. Okay, next slide, please. So, going back to the sustainability issue, old enough to save the planet, question mark. Is there an age at which we should be introducing children to certain issues, or should we be protecting children from certain issues? This is a big debate in the literature. There is no right or wrong answer to this, but there are some academics, some authors, some people who do research that say young children should be sheltered from the problems of the world because we don't want to. Early childhood is such a short period of time, and that innocence, if you like, and we want to sort of protect that innocence. And the argument goes that we shouldn't be giving them too much information, that we don't want to make them anxious and we don't want to make them nervous. The other side of the debate argues that children need to be made aware of what affects the world because it affects them as well. So these are very interesting debates, and I'm not saying there's a right or wrong, but I just wanted you to point out what some of these debates are. I don't know if you know this young girl. If you do, can you put your hand up? Yeah, we've got two. Does anybody know who this girl is? Yeah? But not many. I'm surprised not many. Come on, if you do, put your hand up. Yeah, okay. So her name's Greta Thunberg. But, she is a big environmental campaigner, and she's a big hero of mine. So I really, she's been a very big inspiration for me because she is a young person who speaks out on environmental issues, because she is saying, this is my future, and you as adults need to be more responsible for what you're doing. And she's, so I think, again, I think she's a very important influence on my thinking, certainly. Next slide, please. So children have a role, arguably, as global citizens, not just us, but young children. And education for sustainability in early childhood should arguably, therefore, be seen as essential, not just optional. So that's what I would like to put out to you as something that you may want to think about and debate. Again, no rights or wrongs, but it's important that we do discuss these issues. Increasing recognition that developing understandings of the importance of sustainable futures is crucial in promoting children's development of respect of the natural environment and so on, and again, become global citizens. Next slide, please. So there's a great quote here that I've included from Medress in 2008, and Medress says, if today's children learn to make decisions with the environment in mind, tomorrow's future will be cleaner, greener, and energy leaner. So I think that's a nice quote and something that's quite memorable. And I've just put up a little picture to one of the books that explores some of those environmental issues. It's called The Polar Bear's Home by Lara Bergen, and it speaks to young children about global warming, but it does so in a way that is measured, and helpful. You don't need to scare the children, but it's important to get them maybe thinking about issues of home, thinking about notions of home from a personal perspective, but also from a global perspective. So these are ways in which we can help young children to become global citizens and responsible global citizens. Next slide, please. So I'm going to just now talk briefly about some directions for academic research, if that's okay. 2 minutes and I'll stop. So very briefly, directions for maybe you to think about. There are surprisingly few studies exploring benefits of using children's literature to teach global citizenship. There's a lot about sustainability, but not about global citizenship. So you may want to think about that. Next one. Particularly in light of the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, because that pledges to foster an ethic of global citizenship and shared responsibility alongside intercultural understandings, tolerance and mutual respect. Next one, please. It is strange that there's a lack of academic research in this field when you consider that the Sustainable Development is concerned with global citizenship in particular. And so preparing children to become citizens in the 21st century. And then, okay, there are debates around whether traditional physical copies of books are the best way, or electronic books, electronic e-books. And there is some interesting research out there. And you may want to think about maybe following it up because it's in its infancy. We don't know enough about it. So some people say that some research tells us that children display higher levels of persistence during adult-led e-storybook reading compared to traditional storybooks. And then there's other research that says children communicate more during a traditional storybook format. So we need to also balance that up with whether there's a need for students to create e-books because of the environmental benefits. 2 more slides and then I will stop. Okay. How about student-authored children's books? We think about adults writing books, but we never think about the children writing and publishing books themselves. Of course, as adults, authoring literature doesn't represent a child's view of the world. Rather, it represents a privileged space. This is what Babbage says. It represents a privileged space in which we witness the operations of adult dialogues with children. But we ought to also be thinking about how we can promote children's authorship. Next slide, maybe, yeah. Okay, high quality literature. Consider how teachers can use subject-related fiction and non-fiction books for young people to explore and develop disciplinary literacy skills and understanding. And then my last slide. And I told you about that book with Le Petit Prince, and that's probably my favorite book. And I think a good book is like a good teacher. You always remember them, and you're always grateful and thankful to them and what they've given you. So thank you for listening, and hopefully we'll have an opportunity to ask questions later on. So terima kasih. Okay.
You have the USB as well, so I can control the slides. Yes, yeah, no, it's there, it's okay. Okay, so, no, it's okay. I'll do it, yeah. So, Pamaft, Pawejan, Salamat Siang, everyone. How lovely to be here. So I'm just going to start by playing you a little bit of a video. Here we go. Oh, there's no audio. Hang on a minute. Wait, let's start again. Is there audio? Because I had music. So can we start from the very beginning? Yeah. Just give me a minute, please, because I would like for you to experience the visuals and also the audio. So can we just have somebody to, so if we go back to the very beginning. Yeah, I think you have somebody who's, okay? Okay. So this is what's called take two. Audio? Ah, okay. Maybe, okay. So if we stop one more time, take three. So can we stop it? Yeah. No, go back. Yeah. Can you go back to the beginning? Okay. No, you're showing my slides already. You need to go back. Okay. Okay. Yeah. All right. Okay. Okay. You ready? Ready? Okay. Shall we try? Okay, we're going to do take three. Okay. Oh, no. Go back, please. Okay, hang on. Okay. May I please? That's all right. So it's just this one, isn't it? Yeah? You have to use the mouse? No. Okay. Is this the beginning? Okay. I think we'll just have to play the Wayang clip without any audio. But I really wanted to show this clip to you because, oh my goodness, I fell in love with Wayang kulit during my first trip here to Indonesia and to Jogja. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Terima kasih. So, it's such an honor to be here today at UAD. And I would like to thank you so much for the opportunity to share some of my insights on Indonesian folktales and their significant role in developing a sense of identity, especially in early childhood education. So the first thing I'd like to do is to explain a little bit on how my interest in folk tales came to be. I, like most of you here today, recognize the power of words. Okay? So, whether we are wittingly or unwittingly aware. The way that we use words defines us. Just the other week, I was speaking to somebody from my university, and I'm a mother, so I described my 3 children thusly. My eldest son is quiet and measured. My middle son is an extrovert. And my youngest child, my daughter, she is so grumpy. So, what does that tell you about me, who is their mother? What does that tell you? Okay? Now, if I were to say to you now that my children actually represent the very best of me, what would that tell you about me and about my personhood or my identity? Okay, I will have some assistance now. Thank you. So, could we go to the next slide, please? So, and the next slide, one more, please. So, I want to talk to you now about constructing self-identity. So, when I was introduced earlier by Buddha, she mentioned that not only was I an educator, but I'm also a psychologist. So I've always been interested in self-identity. And as a psychological concept, self-identity is how you identify and how you define yourself. It is your perception of things like specific and selective traits, qualities, abilities, and characteristics that represent you. As an individual, you have numerous physical attributes, internal characteristics, social roles, and external connections which make up your personal identity. As a psychologist, I am also very interested in the way that people construct their identities. And as a reason, I am very interested in the way that people use words to do so. I have spent so many hours trying to make meaning of words that my participants say, whether that is through the medium of an interview or a survey or even the stories that people tell of themselves. And amongst those stories that people tell are folk tales. Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? Okay. So all the IT things are going wrong with me. There's a sense of deja vu about this because the last time I was here in this room, the same thing happened. So I was saying to Buhida, I want to control my own slides. And oh well, never mind. Okay, now, do you recognize this phrase? Yeah, so, gundu, gundu, pachuchu, gambalingan. Okay, that's all I know. Okay? You can sing the rest for me. However, I actually became interested in Indonesian folk tales when I was introduced to Gundul Gundul Pachuchu Gambalingan. Yeah. And that's the lyric that I remember. So, some of you, or maybe a lot of you might know that this tale is actually attributed to Sunan Kalijaga. Yeah, okay. So it tells the story of a leader without a crown, but instead he has a hoe, the pachul. Yeah? So he has rice in a basket on top of his head, which unfortunately spills to the ground. And in this tale, the rice represents the people's mandate. And as a hoe bearer, as somebody who holds the patrol, this leader has to work. Thank you. Okay, mic number 3. Okay, so as a leader, he has to work so hard for his people. However, okay, in his head, he has 4 honors: the eyes, the ears, the nose, and his mouth. Okay, so the ears are to listen to what the people have to say. The eyes are to see the people's needs and difficulties. The nose is to smell the aroma of kindness. And the mouth is to say fair words. So, the last time we were here in January, Pa Alex has said we had a British Council project, but actually that was for helping to develop inclusive childhood education. And in the context of developing inclusive practice in early childhood education, we have been very privileged to be here, to be able to support in Indonesia. And of course, this tale, the Gundul Gundul Pachulchul tale, has very important things for us to consider, all of us who have been involved. Okay, may I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So let me talk a little bit now about folk tales in Indonesian culture. Folk tales are traditional stories. They're passed down orally through generation. So you need to be able to talk about them. And they involve many mythical creatures, moral lessons, and reflect the cultural values of the community. In Indonesia, you have folk tales here like Malin Kundang. It's the first one there. Yeah, the boy who turned into a stone. Yeah. And then you also have Timun Mas, and there she is with the giant. She is the girl that was born from a cucumber. Okay? And then you have Bawang Merah and Bawang Putih, which is a tale of 2 sisters. And these are not just entertaining stories, but they're actually so important in preserving your cultural heritage. Next slide, please. So, a little bit now about folk tales and cultural heritage. These tales, they actually serve as a connection to our ancestors. They allow us to understand and appreciate the wisdom and the values that they held dear. And through these stories, children learn about bravery, honesty, respect, and the consequences of one's actions, which are all fundamental aspects to our identity. Okay, so I'm making the connection now here. Right, may I please have the next slide? So a little bit now about folktales and identity development. So folktales play such a crucial role in shaping values and morals from a very young age. And according to Prop, these Thank you. Yeah, I know. So those of you who are actually interested in linguistics, Prop is actually a really good book to read. So Prop talks about the morphology of a folktale. And according to his book, these stories convey a very structured way to talk about cultural values. They also provide a sense of belonging and identity, connecting children to their cultural roots and helping them to understand their place in the world. And actually, I'm seated here, and I can see a sea of faces. Some of you must be around 18, 19, 20. You are the very children who would have read these tales. You know, you would have read tales about Malin Kundang, Timun Mas, Bawang Merah, Bawang Puti, amongst others. Okay? So, for instance, the story of Malin Kundang teaches about the importance of filial piety. That means honoring your parents and respecting your parents. And that is a core value of Indonesian society. Next slide, please. Moreover, folktales reflect societal norms and aspirations, and they provide a mirror through which we can see our collective values and ideals. By understanding these stories, children, and you were children once, don't forget that, they not only learn about their cultural heritage, but they also develop a sense of pride and identity. However, in my research, I have become aware of what I'm going to call the irony of Disneyfication. You know Walt Disney? Yeah? Okay. So what this means is that Indonesian folktales, sadly, so sad, have been replaced by YouTube, Netflix, and Western tales and characters such as Peppa Pig, yeah, My Little Pony, some publishers, okay, mic number 5. Some publishers also bowdlerize. Okay, what does that mean? That's a big word, but that means they remove, okay? They remove or they eliminate the so-called unsavory or non-child-friendly elements, such as danger, envy, or rivalry. Okay? Now, I love a good book where there's danger. Yeah? Or excitement of some description. I'm entranced and enchanted when I read such adventurous tales. Now, however, without knowing or having a frame of reference for such things like danger, envy, rivalry, jealousy even, how can educators and parents actually address them when children encounter or experience them? Also, here's a question for all of you. What does your preference for Disney or Disneyfication now tell you about your national identity? Something to think about. Okay, next slide, please. I don't have much more to say, but I would like to offer a couple more slides which talk about how we might actually integrate folktales into our practice in early childhood education. I want to start off by enumerating some benefits. So you'll see there on the slide, we have cognitive benefits because these stories enhance language skills, they spark imagination, and they encourage critical thinking. So that is something that can happen even with very young children. You don't need to wait until university to know about critical thinking, okay? Emotionally, they help children develop empathy, emotional intelligence, and resilience by connecting with characters and understanding their struggles and their triumphs. And socially, folktales also teach about cultural diversity. Here's another phrase for you, bineka tunggal ika. Okay? So, cooperation, and also the importance of community. Okay, next slide, please. Here's some practical examples. And you might also integrate folktales into storytelling sessions. In fact, these are some photographs that came from some newspapers here in Indonesia. I think some of these photographs came from the Jakarta Times. So you might have storytelling sessions where children can listen to and retell stories. You might introduce creative activities such as drawing scenes from the tales, or you might role play characters. And you might also have some discussions about the moral lessons and values that are embedded in the stories. Okay, last slide. So here's my conclusion. Indonesian folktales, no matter what province or district they come from, because I know there are so many from the east to the west across your archipelago. They are a treasure trove of cultural heritage, and they play such a vital role in shaping your identity and values. And by integrating these stories into early childhood education, we can foster learning across all the different domains, cognitive, emotional, and social, and we can help children grow into well-rounded individuals who appreciate their cultural roots. Something that is very important, vitally important to consider through a time of change. And right now, we are going through Merdeka, Pelajar and Campus Merdeka, so it is really something to think about. So, final words, terima kasih banyak.
Wow, thank you very much, Maria. Okay. Yes. All right, so the question and answers will be postponed for Alex and Maria till the end of the session, but because we already have Professor Aran and also Helen in the Zoom. Probably the operator, could you please help us to show Prof. Aran and also Helen in the Zoom, please? Okay, I'd like to welcome them virtually in Yogyakarta, in Universitas Samadalan. Professor Aran and also Helen, am I audible to you there? Check sound. Anyway, while waiting for Aran and also Helen to respond to us, Alex and also Bu Maria, thank you very much. From Alex, we learned quite many titles of English or children literary works probably from UK and also from the world. And then Maria, Ibu Maria, again remind us about our own identity through Indonesian children literature from our folk tales. So thank you very much, Bu Maria, for that. check sound. Check. Our research, yes, yeah, okay. So, three of us is going to have joint research on folktale identity and also childhood education. And and we are already we are now doing the research ethics with Institute of Research and Community Service of Universitas Ahmad Dahlan. Okay, Prof. Aran and also Helen, can you hear us here?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. But can you see us? No. Could you please, the camera, could you please take our angle here so that Aran and Helen can see three of us? The audience that you can see at the moment is the students. So we have 200 students in the room at the moment from English literature, Prof. Aran and also Helen. And if you still recognize my voice, I am Ida.
Yes, hi.
Hello, Prof. Aran and also Helen. It's really nice to see you again, even though still in the virtual mode. Hopefully we can see you again in the future in person. So hopefully we will be able to welcome you here in Yogyakarta, like how we welcome Alex and also Maria from University of Gloucestershire. Thank you, Prof. Aran and also Helen, for being able to be with us here to attend our invitation, for you to share your expertise, Prof. Aran in eco-linguistics and also or ecological linguistics, with the title of the talk is Eco-Narrative, the Search for New Stories to Live By, and Helen as eco-poet. So she's a very internationally acclaimed British eco-poet. She will be able to perform, to have her poetry reading for us here today after Aran's session. So Professor Aran and also Helen, without further ado, I'd like to give the screen to you. Started with Professor Aran, please.
Great, thank you so much. So hello to my colleagues, Alex and Maria. It's nice to see you in Indonesia, and I hope that we can join you. And hello, of course, to Bu Ida, who I also consider a colleague because we're working together. And I'm very happy to be able to talk with you today. So I'm just going to share my screen. So a slightly different title, because I wanted to tell a more personal story about my time in Japan, because I think this is very relative, very relevant to your situation in Indonesia and to education and to language and to literature. So I spent 8 years in Japan.
Professor Aran,
English.
are you now sharing your slide already or not yet?
I'm sharing my screen, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Operator, please, because we, okay. Okay. Apakah sudah terlihat ya?
Yeah, it does say you are sharing.
Yeah. But we cannot see your slide now on the screen.
Let me stop sharing.
Yeah, could you please try to stop share?
Try one more time. And if it doesn't work, I'll just talk about it without the slides.
Yang share dari Profesor Aran, apakah bisa
Okay,
ya?
so I'm sharing again. Can you see anything?
Not yet.
Okay. In that case, I will just talk, which is fine, and I'll just make sure there's nothing on the slide that you need. So, yeah, so I spent 8 years living in Japan, and I learned a lot about the culture. So I was in a little town, and there were a lot of temples in the town, and there were mountains, and there was the river, and I had this beautiful time in nature, connecting with the natural world and the spiritual world of Japan. And I spent a lot of time with older people in Japan, the elders, and they had this community where they grew a lot of vegetables and they shared a lot of vegetables with each other. They had a very ecological way of living, and everything was recycled, reused. When they created, say, pots, they did pots very simply from the local soil and the local clay. And they had this real respect for life. So in one of the places that I was in, it was a beach cafe, and there were like insects that were kind of all around the beach cafe. And I said to the owner, "Why don't you kill the insects?" And she said, "Well, insects are a sign of life, just like cats are a sign of life, and monkeys are a sign of life, and humans are a sign of life. So we're all living, we're all alive, so why would you want to kill other beings?" So I learned this deep kind of ecological wisdom when I was in Japan. But at the same time, Japan is a kind of a place of contrasts. And you have the cities, and in the cities, there are a lot of cars and trains and grey buildings and concrete, and the cities keep expanding. And where I lived, there was this valley that was just outside my window, and these trucks started coming into the valley, and they actually filled up the whole valley, and they put houses on this beautiful valley. And there were some beautiful sacred plum trees in the temple near where I lived, but they were all destroyed to make way for this enormous museum, this kind of concrete and glass museum. And then there were these ecological issues around the world that we couldn't ignore anymore. So there was climate change, and there was biodiversity lost, and there were forest fires, and there were floods. So I thought, I have to incorporate something about the environment, something about ecology into my teaching. I had a moral duty to teach about these things. So I looked for, sorry, do you just make sure everyone else is muted? Thanks. So I looked for some textbooks, and I found a lot of different textbooks that are used in Japan to talk about ecological issues. And these textbooks are all written by people in the West. So they're written by people in the UK, people in America are writing environmental textbooks that are being used in Japan. And so I looked at a lot of these textbooks, but I actually found them rather boring. There was something about them which didn't really make you want to protect the earth. So, for example, a quote from one of the textbooks says, "What humans do with their biological resources." So it's talking about animals and plants and forests and rivers as resources, things that are owned by humans. And it talks about their biological resources as if humans own the forests, as if humans own the rivers and own the ecosystems. So this is an anthropocentric view. It's a view which places humans right at the center as the most important thing. And then I found that these textbooks were encouraging consumerism. They were encouraging people to buy lots of things that they don't need. So, for example, there's a car advertisement, and this is actually in an environmental textbook, and the way that it's talking about cars, it sounds like a car advertisement. So this environmental textbook says, an office worker may go to work in somber clothes, but on weekends, he or she drives a dashing sports car. The car has released that person's inner self. So even though it's about the environment, it's talking about cars as if they're very attractive, as if they're the kind of things we would want. And then it says, but cars use a lot of petrol, so we should switch to electric cars. It's still encouraging you to buy cars. And then another environmental textbook that was being used in Japan said, the Dutch say that now their air is getting purer and that their health is better. But motorists could ask the Dutch one simple question. Can you put your hand on your heart and honestly say that you love your bicycle as much as you love your car? So again, it would say, but cars use a lot of petrol, so we should use more efficient cars. But it's still promoting cars rather than bicycles. And then another textbook says, some people are worried about the spread of a global culture. They fear that nations and peoples are losing their individuality. But the global culture is here to stay. So everyone might as well just relax, watch an American movie on television, and eat a slice of pizza. So these textbooks were really spreading American and British culture around the world, trying to get people to buy British products, like buy lots of cars. And they weren't really addressing environmental issues. And this is English language imperialism. It's a bit like what Maria was just saying about Disneyfication. You have these Western ideas like from Disney, and they come across the world and they destroy the local cultural ideas. So in Japan, they have a lot of really wonderful ecological ideas that are embedded into the culture. So before people eat in Japan, they say itadakimasu, which is giving thanks to the plants and animals who died for the meal. They have the Hanami Festival, which is a festival of looking at the flowers in the spring, the cherry blossoms in the spring. They have the Tsukimi Festival, which is looking at the moon. They have Shodo, which is calligraphy, which flows with nature. And I know in Indonesia there are so many traditional nature-based rituals, practices, ceremonies, events that really show respect for the whole of life. So these textbooks were coming from the UK into Japan, and they were bringing Western consumerist ideas into Japan, even though in Japan there's a lot of ecological wisdom and knowledge. So what I did was I got my students to go and ask their grandparents, what does itadakimasu mean? Because I wanted them to explore something about Japanese culture. And the students loved doing this. So the kind of things that they found. So one of the students says, itadakimasu means I'll receive your life as my life. We think of all living things, all plants and animals, as having precious lives. It's deep ecological wisdom that they were getting from their grandparents. Through itadakimasu, we learn about the connection of life. Saying itadakimasu is a wonderful part of Japanese culture. So they were exploring their own culture, and they were discovering some deep ecological wisdom in their own culture. And one student says, my grandmother says that itadakimasu expresses gratitude to the plants and animals that were enjoying life before being killed by humans. My mother says we say itadakimasu to thank the people who prepare and grow the food. Finally, my friend says she thinks nothing when she says itadakimasu. So here we can see the generations. And I know a lot of you in the audience are 18 years old. And maybe some of that deep ecological wisdom, that environmental consciousness, has been overtaken by YouTube and by Western cultures coming in and industrialization. But the older people still have that wisdom, and we can talk to them and get some ideas from the older people. So that is my idea of language education in Japan or in Indonesia. That what you're doing in language education is you're learning about the ecological wisdom within your own culture, within your own country. The reason for learning English is so you can express those ideas from your culture in English and spread them across the world. And for me, that is very much more important than spreading Western ideas across the world, because we know that those Western ideas are leading to ecological construction. So practically, I would say that in language classes, the students can be exploring their own cultures and the ecological ideas in their own cultures and practicing writing them in English. And it is happening in Japan. So schools in Japan are using the materials that I've created, and these students are looking at traditional Japanese ideas. They're writing haiku in English, and they're expressing these ideas to a global audience. Great, so I'm going to stop there and hand over to Helen, or back to Edith. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. Aran, for again introducing us to different. Wow, we have quite a number of students joining us online. How many students online? 57. So altogether, almost more than 250 students in hybrid mode. Prof. Aran, thank you very much for opening our insights on ecological narratives that we can learn from Japan. And hopefully later on, when you have some time to come to Indonesia, you will also add more on ecological narrative or ecological perspectives from Indonesia someday. Yeah, okay. So we have already moved from Alex with, the world's children literature in the world, and then Maria in Indonesia, and Aran from Japan. Now we would like to hear the poetry reading from Helen. Helen, can you hear my voice?
I can hear your voice.
Okay,
yes, thank you.
Helen, I have ever heard you reading your poetry, which was very beautiful and very heartwarming. And now I'd like to hear that for the second time. I want the other participants to join me in listening to your poetry reading today. Please, the screen is yours.
Oh, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to join you, and it's also wonderful to follow Professor Aran and to be inspired by his work. Thank you so much. So I'm just going to introduce a little bit about my creative practice as an eco-poet, because I thought you might be interested in hearing about where my ideas come from, how they've developed, also why I call myself an eco-poet, why I describe my work as eco-poetry, and then I will read a selection of my eco-poems. And I have tried to choose eco-poems that are maybe not so specific to the British landscape and British nature, so that hopefully they can translate more easily to you all. So yeah, why eco-poetry? I'm asked this question a lot, and for me it is about taking the idea that Aran just talked about of anthropocentrism, where we put the humans at the top of the pyramid and make them the most important, to move from this way of seeing the world to an ecocentric worldview, like Aran was describing in Japan, where there is an understanding of how everything is interconnected, nothing is more important, humans are not more important than the other beings in the ecosystem. So that is what fundamentally my eco-poetry is about, is trying to change the consciousness in my own culture, and maybe in other cultures. But of course, I was, as a young person, conditioned to think in terms of consumerism, shopping. I was conditioned to see the most important aspects. And so it's been a slow journey for me of changing my way of seeing the world. I am a vegan, so I decided that I didn't want to eat meat, particularly because of the way that animals are kept in industrial agriculture, the terrible suffering that they endure. So my veganism has been an important part of my changing mindset. I also don't own a car. I always travel by public transport or walking on my bicycle. and I have been involved in environmental activism to try to challenge some of the destruction that also Aaron described. He described the valley turning into houses and a museum. So I have been involved in similar kind of situations here in Britain, campaigning to stop destruction of nature. And I was also increasingly influenced by reading philosophers and writers who were bringing a more ecocentric worldview, and scientists as well. And I did receive quite a lot of negative responses, especially 20 years ago when I began this journey and I started talking about myself, identifying as an eco-poet. People were saying, why? And they didn't like me taking this stance. But it's been an important thread for me over the past 20 years. And yeah, so I'm going to start by sharing a poem which is a celebration of our beautiful planet Earth. And it was influenced by the work of the British scientist James Lovelock, who developed the idea of Gaia theory, that the Earth, planet Earth, is a self-regulating superorganism. So he borrowed the ancient Greek name Gaia for the goddess of the earth. And so this poem is like a poem hymn. It's like a celebration, a spiritual celebration of the earth. Glory be to Gaia. Glory be to Gaia for rainbows, glaciers, and fresh snow. We honor and praise you, Gaia, mysterious blue planet, unique in this vast universe. Like your widest rivers, our hearts flow with gratitude. Glory be to Gaia for forests, valleys, and exquisite flowers. We honor and praise you, Gaia, great mother. Thank you for clean air and water, and all the fruits and seeds manifest through your abundant power. Glory be to Gaia for birdsong, mountains, and clear lakes. We honor and praise you, Gaia, giant, pulsating orb of life from which we've grown. Please help us feel our interdependence with all animal and human kin. Glory be to Gaia for millipedes, worms, and all tiny creatures. We honor and praise you, Gaia, ceaseless wheel of life. We embrace your eternal cycle, the rich soil our bodies will become. And the gift this present moment is. Glory be to Gaia for whales, phosphorescent, and fish. We honor and praise you, Gaia, planet jewel of the cosmos, sacred being infused in our DNA. Please light the spark of peace in us, that we may serve this precious life. So that was a poem that I created. It was actually set to music and sung by a choir in a cathedral in England, which was a very beautiful moment for me to experience. I'm going to move on now to share a poem which is a little bit more of a sad poem. It's about the impact of pesticides on earthworms. And I read a report recently which was made by some scientists in India, and they calculate that $38 billion is spent around the world every year on pesticides. But their study was looking at the effect of these pesticides on earthworms, and they really have a terrible effect. That they harm the worms' bodies, they stop them being able to reproduce so easily, and often they kill them if they eat the pesticides in the soil in too great quantity. And I was inspired with the title of this poem by another poet, a Swedish poet, who described earthworms as underneath farmers, because they are under the soil farming all the time, ingesting the soil and creating rich, fertile soil to help our crops and food to grow. And I'm also influenced by the great British poet William Blake. And he said that everything that lives is holy. So I embrace this idea also in the poem. The underneath farmers. They especially love the rain. It drums on clods and furrows and draws them up like ruddy shoots to roll and wallow in the damp. When the tractor rumbles overhead, drizzling pellets in tic-tac formation, it drives them up to dance for God, to writhe in fields of paradise. Instead, the limpid pools sting and burn, and their skin is quickly turning fuchsia. They have no hands to wave nor tongues to speak, but their heads and tails are curling, asking for mercy, begging us to stop. So part of my role, my job description, I see as an eco-poet, is to advocate for the more than human world, for nature, for creatures who do not have our human languages to communicate. So that is part of my role, is to try to share maybe their perspective, to raise consciousness, to raise awareness. Like Aaron, I am also very interested in language and how it reflects the way we see the world. And my next poem is about a phrase that we use in English to describe nature. So sometimes we talk about natural history. And if any of you have ever been to London, you may have been to the Natural History Museum. And I find this a very strange way, natural history, to talk about living nature, as if it really were a museum, something dead, something from the past. So my next poem takes up this idea and points to the stories, the narratives that this language generates in our minds. Nature story. Natural history, the lexical preserve of stretched skin, glass cases, curators in drab ties, dusty, lifeless, atomized, its nature boiled down to a whale's rib, air breathed through the dehumidifier's teeth. It keeps neat accounts and classifications, but cannot imagine the latency of woodland, a fallen trunk rife with spores, the rhythms of lichen. In its dreams, the future's stuffed, and taxidermists rub their hands. So I'm just going to conclude my sharing with one final poem, which is also really a kind of celebration, I think, of our connection with the more than human world. And it's an honoring of the ancestors. And I know certainly in Japan, there is a real tradition of honoring ancestors, and maybe also in Indonesia, I don't know. But the ancestors that I want to honor in this poem are maybe not the ancestors that we necessarily first think about when we think of ancestors. And it's a real sense of our connection through evolutionary time with the whole planetary web of life. I thank my ancestors. Thank you, infinitesimally great grandmother worm, for gifting us the swirl of blood pulsing through our bodies to feed each tiny cell, and praise be upon you. Thank you, ancestor fish, for evolving vertebrae that lend our spines the flexibility to move, to bend, to walk upon our feet, and praise be upon you. Dear fish, thanks once more for bequeathing your jawbones to become the stirrup, anvil, hammer, eardrum that allow us to hear other beings, and praise be upon you. Gratitude, old cousin reptile, for a brain that alerts us to danger, and to you, paleo mammal, for a limbic system opening us to pleasure, and praise be upon you both. Thanks, dear monkey sibling, for developing eyes in the front of your head. It freed you to climb and leap, while binocular vision gives us all focal depth, and praise be upon you too. To you, sister ape, gratitude for sharing your DNA and your intelligence. Also for hands to learn the use of tools. May every being pick up appropriate technology. Then praise be upon us all. So that's my contribution to today's gathering. Thank you so much for listening. It's a pleasure to share my words with you. If you're interested in finding out more about my work, you can visit my website, which is helenmoorepoet.com. And I look forward to hearing if you have any questions later. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Helen Moore. Yes, it's, I don't know, I'm speechless. This is not the first time for me to see you reading poetry, but still the feeling it never changed. The way I enjoy you reading your poem, and also the way you open up our eyes on to understand the environment much better, especially because we have here our young generation in the class, 200 even more, because some of the students also join us online. It's so I just cannot say that, just one word that I like to say that thank you so very much for sharing your ideas through very beautiful poetries. And hopefully that this is not going to be the first and the last for you to share to us here about your poetries. And I believe that probably some of our students have already got in their mind on, going to your website to take your poetries to be their object of research instead of, finding other old poetries, old English poetries. And thank you very much for adding the list of poetries that we are going to learn in our classroom. Yeah, thank you very much, Helen. And also, Prof. Aran, I hope that you're still with us. Before the Ashar prayer, I will give only, I'm sorry, Helen, also Aran, because time is very limited, one question for each. For Prof. Aran and also for Helen, because they will not be able to join us until the end of the session. So the questions for Pa Alex and also Bu Maria will be postponed until the end of the session today, after we have all the speakers. So please, could be from the lecturers and also the students. One question for Prof. Aran, yes, Abdi, one, and one question for Helen. Abdi, your question will be to Prof. Aran. Oh, later. For Alex and Bu Maria will be later. But now the questions will be to Prof. Aran and Helen. From students or from my colleagues, Pak Neri, Pak Verdi, Bu Hana, Bu Dinar, Bu Wi, Pak Maf, if you have anything to share, anything to ask, to confirm. And we have here Pak Neri as the lecturer for children literature. Yeah, probably you have anything to share to Prof. Aran and also to Helen. Also, you are the lecturer of poetry. Yes, please, if you have anything. Yes, the microphone. Oh, yeah, your experience in teaching poetry and also children literature. Yeah, microphone please to Pak Neri. Yes. Ya, Pak Neri, ya. Nanti dulu, okay. Oh, one student, okay. Siapa? Abdi for Pak Alex later. I think Abdi will be to Pak Alex or Bu Maria, ya, I think.
No, I would like to ask.
To Prof. Aran or to Helen? To? Oh, to Bu Maria, okay, later. Okay, Pak Neri, okay, yes. Pak Neri, oh, no yet. Oh, okay, all right then. Anyone to Prof. Aran and Helen? Yeah, Bu Wi. Oh, Irfan. Irfan, you're quite interested in Japanese literature. Yes, please, because Prof. Aran also shared about Japan. Now, please, yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So, for someone who was in Japan for quite some time, I also have some experience myself regarding the culture in Japan. But one thing that I want to know is what is the most important learning that you got after living in Japan for 8 years?
Okay, that's for Prof. Aran. Prof. Aran, can you hear the question?
Yeah, thank you. That's such a
okay.
great question.
Okay.
It's nice to see all the students there. So there's one really important learning that I got from Japan, and that is about the value of life. It's about valuing animals and plants as beings who are living their own lives for their own purposes. They are alive and they want to carry on living. And that is such a beautiful idea. So, of course, we shouldn't be hurting other animals. And we shouldn't think of animals just as resources. So animals are beings who are living their lives. They're not just meat or resources for humans. So this appreciation of the value of all life, that is the thing that I got from Japan the most. So thank you for the question.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for answering the
And also, Irfan, thank you. If there is no more question, I'd like to, oh yes. Sure.
Oh, hello, Helen. Are you there?
I'm here, yes.
Do you mind if I ask a quick question?
Please do.
It's the first time I've heard your poetry, so thank you so much. I was really inspired, like breathing.
Oh, bless you. Thank you.
But I've got a question, and it's around what really struck me and struck very strongly was the spiritual or even religious undertones of the language that you use within your poetry. For example, praise be upon you, and it really struck me. And I just wondered, is what that is informed by, and is it the gravity? Is it some form of the gravity of the subject matter that you were speaking of? I don't know if that makes sense as a question, but I guess it's what informs that spiritual or religious undertone. Thank you, Helen.
Yeah, thank you. That's such a fascinating question. I mean, the poems that I chose today, I would say all do reflect that sort of eco-spirituality, and I love that word gravity that you've used. And I think, the kind of Blakean idea of everything that lives is holy, would be quite a sort of fundamental underpinning of that approach. But the range of my poetry can also be very satirical. Sometimes I draw on the sort of languages of consumer capitalism. So my poems can be quite varied, but just the ones that you heard today perhaps reflect more that eco-spiritual perspective. But yes, I think for me, it's about finding language that is celebratory, that brings reverence, that changes our attitude. So Aaron was saying about the way that the dominant Western worldview has encouraged us to think of nature as resources that we can appropriate, exploit, ad infinitum, but actually, there is an intrinsic value, an inherent right to life, and so somehow there is a need to find language that changes that perspective. So that's sort of what I'm aiming to do. Does that answer your question?
It does, Helen. Thanks very much. And I think you've encapsulated it with the term reverence. That should be the takeaway word that I shall keep with me today.
Lovely.
Longer than today, but that's it. Thank you very much, Helen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Helen, for answering the question. I was also wondering about that because praise be upon you is quite familiar for us here, and we usually use Arabic words, Assalamualaikum, right? Yeah, that's praise be upon you, and that's why I was also having the same thought that your inspiration might come from the spiritual or religious reference. Okay, so that's the first session of our today's sharing session, and we will be back again after the Asar prayer at 15:30 probably. For 15:45, 15:30, but please, students, please come back here because we still have two more speakers from UK will be joining us online. And for Professor Aaron and Helen, thank you so much. And if you have any other things to do after this, you feel free to leave the Zoom. But we will be in touch, and I hope that we will again invite you to see our students in the classroom, especially on the poetry and also linguistics, linguistics, Prof. Aaron, and also poetry for Helen. Thank you so much. Bye-bye for now. And see you again, students. Yeah?
Bye.
Bye-bye. Yeah. Take care. And once again, we will be having our break, and I'll see you again soon here in this room. Okay? Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Saat presensi. Begitu. Terima kasih. Monggo silakan bisa salat dulu.
that, wrote you emails 2 years ago, if you remember.
Please do that. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, okay, I will. Yeah, thank you so much. Hillary, yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. And we have already had our sessions with Professor Aran earlier, and also Helen Mo, eco poet from UK, and also from University of Gloucestershire, of course, and also Alex and Maria from School of Education. Yeah. Okay. I have already seen some of the students entering the room, and I will let you know soon after if everyone is in the room already. Okay. Charlotte, so we are going to start our session now, and I'm confused where to see. Yeah, so I will see that camera. Again, I like to say it's very nice meeting you virtually again here after our coordination through email. So this is the first time for me to see you in person, even though it's in a virtual mode, and thank you so very much because you can join us here and accept our invitation to share with us with the in offline mode we have around 200 students, and in online we have around 30 students, and they will be joining us again because we had a break after the first session. And I'd like to read very short introduction of you to our participants here. So Dr. Charlotte Bayer, and later on we will also have Dr. Hilary Wicks, our senior lecturers in English studies or English literature in the University of Gloucestershire, UK. And Dr. Charlotte Bayer will be the first, and will be continued by Dr. Hilary Wicks. The title of the talk of Dr. Charlotte will be Crime Fiction and the Politics of Representation. Charlotte is a contemporary literature specialist with a background in gender and women's studies. Her teaching and research interests include crime fiction, post-colonial writing, and contemporary American and British literature. I personally was in touch with Charlotte in 2022 when I proposed her to be my potential supervisor for my PhD plan in University of Gloucestershire. However, it was not successful because unfortunately, there is no University of Gloucestershire in the list of our government scholarship. And we have been discussing on my proposed topic about the representation of motherhood in UK and also Indonesian literature. It was supposed to be a comparative literature in my plan. And today, Charlotte will be talking again about representation in a different perspective. And later on, Dr. Hilary Wicks will talk about English at the University of Gloucestershire. She teaches and researches 19th century Romantic and Victorian British literature, European affinities, travel writing, aesthetics, architecture, and the visual arts, as well as the pre-Raphaelitism and religion. So, ladies and gentlemen, students, please welcome Dr. Charlotte Bayer. I will give the screen to you, Dr. Charlotte. Yes. You still mute, I think, or cannot hear your voice?
Can you hear me?
Now, yes, please.
Okay, good. I'm just going to share my screen so that I can show you my slides. And hopefully they should be up and running now. So we will see how that goes. So I am honored to be invited to come and speak to you and all of these students who I saw in the audience. Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you to Alex for inviting me to address your meeting this morning. I am truly honored to be able to share with you what we do at the University of Gloucestershire, and also to say a little bit about my research. So in my talk this morning, I want to say a little bit about my research and a little bit about how I teach this research. So yeah, that's what you can expect from me. My talk will focus mainly on crime fiction, but I'll say a few other things besides. So first of all, just some general notes about our English literature course at the University of Gloucestershire. We are a team of English specialists. We're very experienced lecturers and academics, all of us, and you've already had opportunity to listen to Aaron and Hilary, my other colleague, will be following after my talk. So we've all got PhDs, i.e. doctorates, and publication records, but above all, we are dedicated to teaching and love sharing our work, sharing our thoughts with students and helping them develop to be their best versions of themselves. So now that we've just come to the end of our academic year in the UK, and we can look back and think about all of the work that our students have done this year, and I can say that we truly pride ourselves of getting the best from our students, and the way that we do that is through the close support that we give them and the detailed guidance that we provide, helping them to channel their abilities and to find out what makes them tick in life, professionally and in their literary studies. So who am I? Thank you for your kind introduction, Ida. I don't need to tell you anymore, really, because you pretty much said it all. So I just wanted to add that I am the author and editor of 10 books to date, and I'll say a little bit more about this body of work of mine in a minute. I have also published numerous chapters and articles because I love collaborating with and working with other writers, other people to generate creative output. Apart from reading crime and writing about crime, I'm also a judge. Not a judge in a courtroom, but a judge of literature. I am a judge of the Crime Writers Association Dagger Award, which is an annual award which is given in London just in a couple of weeks' time. So I'm looking forward to taking part in that award ceremony once again. I'm also a member of the UK Research ESRC Peer Review College, which means that if others are submitting research proposal to the ESRC, then I will be helping to peer review those research proposals. And this is just a fun little image that I created out of 9 of my book covers so far. So you can see there's quite a variety of work that I've put out, but some of it is specifically to do with teaching. And I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. But these are some of my edited works: Mothers Who Kill, contemporary crime fiction, or Mothers Without Their Children, and also Traveling Mama. So I'm very interested in representations of parenthood, as you can see, and this I've developed further in some of my research. So just wanted to say a little bit more about 3 of the books that I've published recently, just so you get a better sense of who I am and the kind of work that I do and how it fits into this these talks that you're having today. So on the left-hand side, you'll see a book cover called Crime Fiction in the Age of Me Too. And this is my latest book, which will be published in November by Anthem Press. And in that book, I explore the commonalities or intersections between fourth wave feminism, the Me Too movement, and contemporary crime fiction. So I found in writing this book that contemporary crime fiction explores a number of social and cultural issues to do with social justice for women and other marginalized social groups. So, for example, subjects like reproductive rights or discrimination in the workplace or sexual violence, all of these different crimes are treated in this literature, and that's what my book is about. So I'm very relieved that I finished it. It was very gratifying to write it. The other book I wanted to just briefly mention to you is the book in the middle called Decolonizing the Literature Curriculum. I published this book a couple of years ago. It's an edited book done with a number of other colleagues who have all been engaged with the project of decolonizing the curriculum in teaching English literature and English studies. So again, this was a very interesting book to write. We wrote it during the pandemic, during the COVID pandemic, which meant that a lot of us were having to juggle different teaching and learning methods at the same time as thinking about what decolonization means and how we do it. I'm very proud that this book was awarded a prize this year by the British Association for Contemporary Literary Studies for the best edited book published in 2022. Finally, I just wanted to mention my book on children's literature, children and young adult literature, so you can see that although I specialize in crime fiction, it's not my only area of interest. And in my book on children's literature, it's called Writing Back to History and Oppression. I again look at how social justice themes to do with identity and its intersections are treated in children's and young adult literature. So in the book, I investigate American literature, British literature, Scandinavian literature, and works from Australia and New Zealand. So it's really a kind of comparative literary study, like the kind of study you mentioned before, Ida. So moving on to say a little bit generally about crime fiction before I address our teaching, how I teach this material. So when we talk about crime fiction, we often think about detectives, we think about a type of writing which can be quite generic, which can be quite formulaic, always following the same steps. But I'm interested in the way in which crime fiction tries to do much more than this, especially by focusing on certain key issues, such as the detection of crime and the definition of crime, punishing the perpetrators of crime, finding the truth, and achieving justice for the victims of crime. These are very important subjects, which I think reveal a lot about our society, reveal a lot about our cultures, and the way in which they are set up, and the way in which some stories are just not allowed to be told sometimes. But literature can help with illustrating these stories, and because literature reaches wide audiences, wide readerships, literature is able to generate change. So a little bit more now about the module that I teach at the University of Gloucestershire on crime fiction. As you can see from the slide, there are some images that we typically associate with crime fiction, especially Sherlock Holmes. You can see the image with the deerstalker hat and the pipe and the key. These are all tropes, images that we have come to associate with Sherlock Holmes. Then there's also a crime tape, do not enter, and an image of an old typewriter starting to write the beginning of a story. So I think these images together suggest very well the interest that crime fiction generates with students. So on my module on crime fiction, I pursue a line of inquiry which takes us from the classics, the crime fiction novels, crime fiction texts, which we're all quite familiar with. And then I move through to look at more recent material, like, for example, crime fiction for children and young adults, domestic noir psychological thrillers, like in the film Gone Girl or The Girl on the Train. I investigate crime fiction by writers of color who treat themes such as race, class, gender, and sexuality. On the module, we assess students by offering them some questions that they can use as a springboard for evaluating and exploring these topics in crime. So you can see some of these questions allow for a more traditional academic approach where students write a critical essay on a topic like gender or a topic like revenge or social class, for example. They're given a range of options. I also give my students a creative option. So this is an English literature degree, but of course you can also assess your knowledge of a subject through a creative lens. And so I invite students that if they are keen to explore their creative powers, that they are able to write a creative response to one of the crime fiction texts that we've studied on the module. And that tends to be a very popular approach. Students really enjoy the ability to write themselves, write their own crime text, and at the same time explore their relationship to the traditional crime fiction that's been published before, that we've studied on the module. So, of course, one of the detectives that we study on the module is Sherlock Holmes. This is an image from the BBC series called Sherlock, which was shown in the 2010s. We're familiar with Sherlock Holmes, the detective, Dr. Watson, his sidekick. But we also on the module talk about how Sherlock Holmes, as a person, as a detective, is associated with certain qualities like exceptional intelligence, exceptional astute powers of observation and deduction that he uses in his detective practice. As well as these intellectual skills, Sherlock Holmes is also fearless, he is compulsive, he will not stop, he will not sleep or eat until he has solved crime. He's a very driven person. His sidekick, Dr. Watson, isn't as intellectually gifted, but instead he has other qualities. He's loyal, he's pragmatic. He's also the narrator. So if you read any Sherlock Holmes stories, you will know that it's Dr. Watson who tells the story, not Sherlock. So on the module, we study a novel by Conan Doyle called The Hound of the Baskervilles, which was published in 1901 and which deals with the superstition of a ghostly big dog hound haunting the Exeter moors. On the module, we also study another classic author, namely Agatha Christie. We study a novel of hers called A Caribbean Mystery, which sees Agatha Christie leave her British village and instead go to the Caribbean for the first time. This novel was published in 1964, shortly after the Caribbean islands had become independent from British rule. So there are many post-colonial themes in this novel, but it also provides a kind of classic model of crime fiction where the detective gathers clues and solves the puzzle of crime. This novel helps us to discuss the idea of Miss Marple and the rise of the female detective and the gender politics of crime fiction. How difficult it is for women to set themselves up as detective figures in the genre, and how, like Miss Marple, who's an older woman, they are often disregarded or not taken seriously until they solve the crime, that is. And of course, Miss Marple does that marvelously in A Caribbean Mystery. Great novel. Read it if you ever get a chance. So funny. On the module, we move on to look at intersectional crime fiction. So intersectional means the way in which race, gender, sexuality, and social class work together in order to create complex identities. In those sessions on the module, we look at how crime fiction is used as a lens through which to investigate social and cultural inequalities for example, people of color, women of color, disabled people, etc. So these are more recent texts that we discuss on the module, and here's an example of one of the texts that we study by an American author called Nikisa Afia. This is a novel of hers called Dead Dead Girls, which was published in 2021. In that novel, Nikisa Afia writes about a previous period in American history, the 1920s, a period of time that we usually call the Roaring Twenties or the Jazz Age. If you have read any Scott Fitzgerald, for example, his novel The Great Gatsby, then you will know how this opulent period has often been presented in American writing. But Nikisa Afia's novel is very different. It's set in Harlem in New York, a black neighborhood, and deals with a serial killer who's targeting black girls specifically. Nikisa Afia has said that she chose to write about this historical period because she felt it was very important, because it started to bring Black Americans and their voices into the cultural sphere in America. So she says, Louisa's story helped me feel closer to my own history and culture. Again, this is a brilliant novel, and if you're interested in finding out more about a contemporary writer thinking about 1920s America and the Jazz Age, then this book will give you plenty of material to think about, and at the same time also some echoes in the book of, for example, recent debates around Black Lives Matter and police violence, especially against people of color. And that is the end of my presentation for you. I hope you have enjoyed hearing me talk about crime fiction and a little bit about the work that I do. But I'm more than happy to take all the questions that you have and share more of my ideas with you when the time comes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. Yeah. Okay, so I think we have to move forward to Hillary Wicks before we open the session for question and answer. Dr. Charlotte, are you still with us? Probably in the next 30 minutes ahead, if it's possible. You're still on mute?
Yes, I'm still here,
Okay,
and I'll be there for the questions later.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay. Dr. Hillary, please, the screen is yours.
Hi, good morning. Good morning, Ida, and colleagues and students of UAD. It's wonderful to join you this morning. Thank you for having me, Ida. Thanks to Alex and Maria for helping to organize this too, or producing this. It is a real privilege and an honor to be here. I guess I can share my screen. I wasn't sure that I could. I sent my slides, but I think I should be able to share my screen. So here goes. Can you hear me, by the way?
Yes, we can hear you.
You can all hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. I thought I'd ask that. Well, let me have a go sharing my screen then. Let's see. See if this works. Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay. That is great. Thank you, Charlotte. Is the sidebar blocking it, or are we all okay? See if I can go to presentation mode. There we are. I think that's a little bit better. Just look at my notes. Okay. Well, this morning I'm going to talk quite generally, really, about the programme as a whole, the BA Hons English Literature at the University of Gloucestershire, say a little bit about my teaching, but really to give you a sense of an overview of what we do. Let's see if I can follow this on. Just bear with me. Okay, thank you. I put my photo there in case you couldn't see me on the screen, but it's kind of unnecessary because you can see me in any case. But I'm Dr. Hilary Weeks. I'm a senior lecturer in English literature, but I'm also the course leader for a fairly small degree called BA Hons English and Creative Writing, and that is largely a language and linguistic based course that is being taught out. We only have the third year, the level 6 left. But we do also have an English literature and creative writing joint degree. So we do have actually a very robust and busy set of cohorts with English literature on the one hand and English literature and creative writing. So that's a kind of a shared degree, a 2-subject degree where students can choose to specialise in 2 disciplines if they wanted to. The academic course leader for English literature I'll be representing this morning is Dr. Jonathan Marshall. He won't be on this call, but we in many ways we share the course leadership in some ways. So it's quite nice to have 2 people for students to speak to. Just keep an eye on the time. Okay, excuse me. Well, I will begin with our approach. And this is from our course strategy, which we update regularly. The last time that we updated it is 2023, and we will be updating it again soon. This is part of the normal national demands of quality, that courses are updated and refreshed every so often, but we have also done that quite recently too. So our approach can really be summarized as follows. It is, we try to produce a course that is intellectually stimulating and challenging, so that students aren't just sitting there and absorbing information, but really helping to produce it and being challenged by what they read and produce, as well as just absorbing and learning and developing a set of subject and other transferable skills. Our approach develops critical thinking and analytic skills that lead to transformation of self and society. In a few minutes' time, I'll look at a couple of modules that specifically do that. But I think these approaches are embedded in all of our modules, and Charlotte has given a sense of that, talking about her crime fiction and the politics of representation and what she does. Our approach encourages students towards effective and ethical leadership. Now, that is very much one of the synergies, I think, that we have with UAD. That also is very strongly up front in UAD's approach, so that students can be leaders really of well, I'm about to say of the future. They're already leaders, I think. They're in their communities, in their work, in their volunteering, in their relationship with other students. They are moving towards a kind of an ethical leadership and exploring that role. Our learning and teaching then is flexible, diverse, and inclusive. Now, we are obviously governed by national principles of what the English literature subject is. We follow the English subject benchmark closely. That's the government's quality. But I wanted to quote this from the English subject benchmark because it says, I think it goes to the heart of what we try to do. Communication and discussion of ideas are central to the subject. Our aims are to develop dialogue and debate, encourage collaboration, explore the value of diverse life experiences, and help students understand different perspectives. Research and teaching, as you've heard already this morning, is also very central to our mission, and I think all of our teaching is research informed and based on our research there. As you know, all the English literature tutors at the University of Gloucestershire are PhDs, we all have doctorates, and we all publish research or have published research as well. And that is research, as you've heard this morning from Aaron and Charlotte, is external and collaborative, very much so. I hope Aaron will forgive me for putting a picture of him there giving a talk. It was just what I had. Again, you will have heard this, but for a fairly small unit of assessment, we certainly punch our weight, and we did extremely well at the REF 2021, the Research Excellence Framework exercise that the government produces every 7 years as well. Almost all of the staff, I think all of the staff were submitted into REF 2021, and we have a very high number of world-leading outputs and world-leading impact, up to 50%, which is quite something. I want to say something about how students teach and learn, and I think perhaps for us the one of the most important thing is small class sizes. This is certainly not the case with many universities, and that's fine. It's a slightly different experience. But it's very strange to teach a class. It must be very strange to be in a class with students where the lecturer doesn't know your name. I can say that we know the names of all our students, and they know us as well. So very, very small classes, usually about 15 to 20. Sometimes the lectures are bigger, but the classes where the seminar and the main work is done are very small. And this photo here, taken by Jonathan, is a very good example of the kind of class size that we're looking at. We don't have any exams. We got rid of exams a few years ago. The students were suffering from exam anxiety and other things. There were issues about timing. And of course, the pandemic also made any exam-based course very, very difficult to run. So I think we were a little bit ahead of the game by getting rid of exams and having all coursework assessment in our courses before the pandemic struck as well. So I think we were advanced with that. Our assessments are very varied. Certainly in the first year or so, the assessments will all be by written portfolios, and a portfolio assessment would be perhaps a mixture of an essay and also a close piece of critical writing, or a creative response to a poem or something like that. I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. As Charlotte has said, offering a creative component can also help students to develop skills and to come to academic writing through the imagination and through their producing work in different modes as well. And I should say it's not just the joint students who choose the creative option. Many of our single honours are excited to develop other sides of their work, of their understanding, and do the creative part as well. We have a very strong personal tutor system, a system of mentorship. as soon as a student joins us, they are assigned to a personal tutor. That tutor stays with them for all 3 years. We generally meet with them twice a year, although of course we also see them in class every week as well, so we can talk to them informally. We guide them with their module choices. If a student is struggling or having difficulty, the personal tutor can pick that up and intervene early as well. So we have a very, very low dropout rate for that reason. Students know that someone is always looking out for them, and that becomes important. And then, of course, the personal tutor can support them as they graduate as well and write them references as well. I've put the word partnership here because that very much goes to the heart of what we do. We approach our course with treating students as partners in their learning. Students are encouraged to take responsibility for their learning. They work with us. We don't simply teach them for a couple of hours a week and then disappear. We work with them. We encourage them to think of themselves as professionals, really right from day one as well. And that partnership extends to course improvement and validation. We ask for student evaluation at a couple of points of the year. So in the light of student feedback about our modules, we can see how to improve our modules, but also to improve our course. I mentioned that our course is validated every so often, and when we revalidate the course, student feedback is part of that revalidation process. We ask students what works and what doesn't as well. So I think we're very proud of our approach to that. Excuse me a moment. I'm going to say a little bit now about how the course is structured. Level 4, 5 and 6 corresponds to levels 1, 2 and 3. First year, second year, third year on this 3-year degree as well. Level 4, first year, is foundational and all the modules are compulsory. They will be able to choose options at levels 5 and 6. But for level 4, everyone does the same thing. And for English literature, these are the modules. Reading and studying English, whereby they really make that transition, I think, from their schoolwork to university standards of writing. There is support for writing, there is library tours, and students also learn the basics of academic writing, academic discourse, and how to research and to use secondary sources as well. The power and magic of language and the structure of English are really linguistics-based modules, whereby students think about the English language and link that to literature as well. Myth and folktale and foundations of drama are foundational modules that I'll teach. I'll come back to those. Writing the self also, I'll talk a little bit about that. Children's literature taught by Charlotte. And poetry, inspiration and expression, that is partly also a creative module where students learn to parse poetry, they learn the rules of prosody, but they also explore the Gloucestershire poets. We have strong links to the what we call the Dimmock poets, of poets like Edward Thomas and Robert Frost, and our archives have some of their papers and holdings. So students are encouraged to explore local poets as well. At level 5, some of the modules are compulsory, but there are also options whereby students can complete their course by choosing the modules they want to do. The compulsory modules first. Engaging humanities is a compulsory outward-facing module. We call it our skills and employability module, But it's also a module where we expect students to do some kind of public engagement, to use what they know to talk to the wider public. That can be through developing educational resources, through producing a blog, and so on as well. So they're encouraged to think about humanities not as something they just do for their assessments, but a way of producing change in the world. And it's also where they can put into practice their ethical leadership. The search for new stories to live by, that may have been a model that Aaron spoke to. The other two are Victorian literature, which I teach, and a module on nature writing, British Romantic writing. Then their options are crime fiction that Charlotte has just spoken about as well. If students who want to take a linguistic and discourse analysis path through the degree can choose dialects, literature and film. Very exciting module where they think about English films and the dialects, the modes of speech, many of which are not delivered in received pronunciation, but which can really feature, for example, Northern or Cockney dialects, and English through the ages. Other modules are American literature, again, which Charlotte has spoken about a little bit, and our module Professional and Critical Writing, which I will come back to in a moment. Level 6, I'll keep this quite brief. The English literature dissertation is compulsory for single and joint honours. Also modules on decolonising literature and imagining new worlds. That goes back to the 17th century and Enlightenment and asks students to think about how science and art have joined together in terms of art and architecture and other things. Options are travel fictions, my modules, gender and sexuality and literature, rethinking self and society, again, communication and leadership, and a module, language, gender and power. Again, I'll keep this brief, but I do want to say something about the English literature dissertation. This is compulsory both for single honours and joint honours. It's composed of two elements. Students have to produce a poster for their work in progress and present that to the group at dissertation day. Before the pandemic, we used to invite the public in. That's really not practicable now. But all the students join together and they learn to present, to talk about their poster, print them out, and discuss their work in progress, so that they can think of themselves as active researchers. The dissertation itself is 9,000 words on any subject they want. This year we've had work on vampire fiction, on motherhood. We've had work on Little Women from the point of view of scripture and proverbs, and so much more. And students are justly proud of their dissertation. So here's a picture of last year's cohort, a couple of years cohort ago, on dissertation day, holding their projects. And it's something that really is the gold standard of their honours degree. And they're justly proud of their work, and we're proud of them too. Okay, going back to some of the modules we teach, I just thought I would show you some of the texts we teach there. I teach a class on myth and folktale, whereby we think of foundational stories. Now, the novel is, for example, is quite a recent development in world literature. There are more ancient ways of storytelling, and we begin with Homer's Odyssey, and also thinking about national epics such as the Welsh Mabinogion from the British Isles, medieval writing and the romance such as Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Also, I think there's some pictures there from Foundations of Drama too. Happy to talk about any of these in the Q&A. Writing the self it really is a step in quite the opposite direction. We ask students to think about transgressive texts and how that might, how issues of race, class, gender, fourth wave feminism and the Me Too movement and Black Lives Matter might fit into what we learn and how students think about literature too. And there's some examples there. There's White Teeth by Zadie Smith, and a cyborg manifesto. And I've also mentioned a couple of other modules that also draw on those issues: gender, sexuality and literature, language, gender and power. But all of our modules have a component of thinking about class, race and gender. For example, in my myth and folktale module, we also now have a guest session on Japanese and Far Eastern ancient mythology. So we are moving away from perhaps a white and Eurocentric idea of what mythology means to something much more global and something much more inclusive. Alan may have spoken about the power and magic of language. He also draws on multimedia, films and advertisements to think about that. Say a little bit about my own module. I'm aware of the time here, Ida, so I will speed up a little bit there so that we can have our Q&A as well. Travel fiction is, again, one of my research specialties. And in this module, I it's partly assessed on a formative assessment whereby I ask students to think of us compiling a travel encyclopedia. It's all very well to think about texts and reflect on them, but if we were writing say a book called Keynotes, Issues in Travel Writing, how could we contribute to that? So I asked them to take a particular issue in travel writing. That could be gender or gendered narratives. It could be the idea of women traveling alone. It could be dark tourism. It could be other forms of tourism when travel writing purports to speak in the voice of cultures which the traveller is visiting. Who has that authority to represent other cultures? So I ask them to take an issue like that, explore it, and write a formative encyclopedia entry of that. Here are some of the texts that we also look at. We begin with Francis Trollope's travel to Paris and to America, through the works of W.G. Zebolt, through Henry James, Bruce Chatwin, Jenny Diskey, and Ian Sinclair, and others besides. I mentioned Jonathan's dialect literature and film, so I will skip over to that, but I'm happy to come back to some of this in the Q&A as well. Charlotte's also spoken about crime fiction, but also I've included American fiction there, and there are some of the texts we look at there. And also decolonizing literature, and again, Charlotte, I know that you have spoken about this with some overlap also with your crime fiction, so I'm going to move on a little bit closely there. In the time that's left, I want to go back to our modules that really try to get students to engage with a wider public and to think about ethical leadership. I've mentioned engaging humanities, but I also want to mention the module professional and critical writing, where students also develop themselves not only as academic, but as professional writers, develop that critique through blogging and other forms of media there, and perhaps digital storytelling. And communication and leadership asks students to make a presentation, and they're partly assessed by that. And here are some of the writers and speakers and influencers that these modules deal with also, and many of them will be familiar to you guys as well. I did want to say something about the fact that we actually do very well in the university's league table. We are at number 19, according to their Guardian, best universities for English studies, and you can see that we're above Swansea, above Birmingham, and yes, we're above Edinburgh too, something that we're very proud of too, and our students know that also. Our students are very happy, and their value-added score shows how effectively they're taught. It's giving as a rating out of 10. You may be able to see perhaps there's a column over that, but we have a rating of 8, which is very high indeed. And just to end with some of our students, I know that we've got many students here listening to us. Here are some of our graduates and what they say about us and their English literature course. Jessica is currently studying for a PhD at Cambridge. She says this course is not just different, it's unique. It offers all the academic skills and knowledge you expect, but the opportunity for exploring practical and meaningful aspects of life. And we were so thrilled that she knows that she got that from our degree. Leonie, down at the bottom, is working in television production too. So it just shows the breadth of work that our students go into, as well as teaching. Sorry, I've gone backwards. I just wanted to say thank you. That is the end of my presentation. I've cut it short a little bit so that we can have Q&A. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll be delighted to take questions now. I'll stop sharing my screen, Ida, shall I?
Thank you very much, Dr. Hilary Wicks, for sharing how is it there in BA in English Literature in University of Gloucestershire. I see some things in common between English Literature in University of Gloucestershire and English Literature in Universitas Ahmad Dahlan. For example, we have American Studies as well. We also have literature and also linguistics, so we have 3 majors in our English literature, but the difference is that we still have exam as our assessment, and also we still have large class. It's like 50 or 60 students, and altogether we have 4 years. While you have 3 years to complete for a bachelor degree. Is that correct, Hilary?
It's a 3-year degree.
Yeah, 3 years degree. So we have here 4 years to be able to have the bachelor degree in Indonesian education system. But you give us quite many perspectives on the models that we might have the benchmarking when we had our curriculum review every 2 up to 4 years. And thank you so much, Hilary, for sharing the models and you know, what you have in Bachelor of Arts in English Literature in University of Gloucestershire. And we now come to the question and answer session for Pa Alex, Bu Maria, and also Dr. Charlotte and also Dr. Hilary. So give the sessions to the students and also the lecturers who join our sessions today. Previously, we had one student would like to ask to Bu Maria and also Abdi. Yes, to Bu Maria, and then yes, I saw some students raising hands. Okay, okay. Please mention your name and also to whom the question you would like to address. Yes, Abdi, please. Yeah.
First of all, I would like to say thank you to the guest lecturers for giving us such an insightful topics in this wonderful day today. My name is Abdi Firmana Rashid, and I would like to ask questions to Madam Madam Meredith.
Yeah.
Just call me Bu Maria.
Ibu Maria.
Okay, sure. Regarding to your topic about folklores, I would like to ask a fun question. Which one, about folklores, which one is your favorite? And do you have your best recommendation for a reference if we want to make a thesis or a journal about literature and folklores? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. I have 2 favorites actually. So I like Bawang Merah and Bawang Putih because I have a sister. You know, she's only 1 year younger than me, and we were so different, and there was a lot of sibling rivalry, And, there's a lot to be learned from healthy sibling rivalry, but not unhealthy competition with each other. And also, it shows me that we should really live in harmony within families. And I must admit, I do have a soft spot for Gundu Gundu Pachuchu because that was the very first story that I learned when I came to Indonesia in January. As for some references, actually at the back of my presentation, and I hope that all of our presentations are made available to students. I have indicated all of my references. But I should remind you all that I'll be doing research with Bu Ida, and it will also be on the topic of folktales and folklore. So if you'd like to have a chat with me through Bu Ida at any time, I'd be very happy to talk to you. I love speaking to students. It's one of my favorite pastimes. On my email signature, it actually says my door is open anytime I'm in. So I will adopt the same policy with you. Thank you so much.
And could I just add, I thought a very good question from the floor. And I just wanted to add that there are several journals that look specifically at folklore. And one of them is the Journal of Folklore Research, which is based in the United States at the University of Indiana. So you may want to look at some of those journals.
Thank you so much, Alex, for adding up that. Could you please share the link to me, and then I will share that to the students. Okay, Abdi, thank you. Another student? Yes. Oh, many. Okay. Ladies first. Yeah. The first one was boys, and now ladies, gentlemen, and now ladies. Ladies, one here. Oh my God. Okay. Yes. Yeah. Your name and also to whom the question you would like to address.
Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Milati Anifa Putri, and I have a question. I'm just curious about, in this modernization days, I rarely see children or kids talk about folklore, and I've realized that folklore slowly disappear. Are there like any way to keep or maintain the folklore for our legacy? Because I know that many kids prefer to play phone instead of learning about cultures and folklore, and that is why I'm just curious if there is any way to maintain our folklore, because if it's disappear, then we won't be having any identities anymore, because folklore is one of our traditional identities. That's it. Thank you.
Yes. This is why I refer to the irony of Disneyfication. And I would say that, well, let me tell you a little story. So in the Philippines, because we're neighbors, there is down in the south, in that part of the Philippines, which is closest to Indonesia, there is a place called Lake Cebu. And Lake Cebu has a great tradition of oracy, and they tell some wonderful stories about the people who live around the lake. Now, unfortunately, the Philippine government, in its wisdom, decided that it would legislate that it would only be Filipino and English that would be used as the national language for teaching. That has had a massive impact on the tradition of oracy in schools, especially around the Lake Cebu region, where their folk tales are transmitted through storytelling and through verbal means or through oracy. So this is very, very sad indeed, because as you've mentioned, and rightly so, we need these traditions. We need these traditions because in order to be able to have a healthy sense of self, we need to know where we come from. So we have a very important role to play. I did mention in my slides that we should actively try and read stories to children. We can ask them to draw the characters in these folk tales, and we can also use other creative means, such as role play. You know, I love acting things out, love a bit of drama. Yeah. But, you know, it's up to us. If we want to preserve our national identity, for example, you know, wayang kulit, that's got UNESCO heritage status. Wow, that's something. So it's up to you, you know, to preserve what is valued within your cultural heritage. Professor Aaron Stibbe used a very interesting term earlier, and that was ecological. You need to help me, Alex. What was that? That was ecological.
Narrative?
No, not narratives, but advocacy. Ecological advocacy. We need to have cultural advocacy. Yeah? Okay, so it's up to you. You have a role to play, not only in preserving your national identity and your heritage, but preserving that for future generations of Indonesians, including your own children when they come. Okay? So remember those folk tales. If you don't use them, resurrect them. Read them to your nieces or nephews if you don't have children. But when your children come along, remember this talk and remember to choose your favorite folk tales and to read it to them rather than Peppa Pig or My Little Pony. Okay? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Good question.
And just again to add to what Maria has said, and again, what a wonderful question from the audience. Maria talked about ecological advocacy, important. In research, there is a term called ecological validity as well. I don't know if you come across that, but again, it can, you know, conceptually, that could be a very helpful way to sort of frame some of what we do. But in terms of how we might go about not losing that oracy and the traditions, folklore traditions, I think there's also a part to be played in education and by schools. So I think it's incumbent on us at the University of Universitas Ahmad Dahlan and the sister university, the 172 sister universities that you have. It can be a very powerful means to advocate for, if you are singing in unison with the same messages for schools, perhaps within the Mohammedan tradition in particular, you don't underestimate the power that you have as advocates to maybe influence elementary teaching and keeping the oracy of the folklore alive and well.
Thank you, Alex, for adding up the answer from Maria. Now, before moving to Hilary and also Dr. Charles, I think you have anything to share about folklore, folk tales, because the two students asked about this topic, which was brought by Maria. Charlotte or probably Hilary, any ideas, any additional feedback from your side? Yeah, because I saw that the curriculum of University of Gloucester also talks about myth and folklore. Yeah. Yes, please, Hilary. Yeah.
Yes, hello. Shall I address that? That okay, Ida? If I address that? Yes. I do teach a class called Myth and Folktale. It is at first year. Myth is also, and mythology is an inheritance, as your speaker said. It is part of their people's inheritance. But inheritance can change also. For example, what might have been considered English folklore, perhaps 100 years ago, has changed with the change in demographic. We have now a large Indian and Pakistani and South Asian population, and so our understanding of folklore, of gods, of mythical creatures has been inestimably enriched by that global approach. And yet people also have their own sense. For example, I notice over the last few years that there has been a resurgence, certainly in this area of where we are in Gloucestershire, of things like May Day celebrations and traditional English folkloric ideas around the May Day, the celebration, and we are coming up to the solstice, so many people are celebrating at Stonehenge now. That's cheering because it does suggest a living tradition rather than a dead one that people kind of want to hold on to it. But I would say that folklore does modify, it changes, just as understandings of the meanings of gods and spirits and so on can change over time as well. That also changes with writing. I mean, on my module I teach Greek and Roman mythology, but that's not how people understand these figures now. They get them through novels. They get them through novels like Circe by Madeline Miller, a novel that tries to give a voice to a silenced woman in Homer's Odyssey, who many translators translate as a witch. But who in fact is in some ways a goddess and a wise woman. So there's that renegotiation.
Yeah, okay, thank you for sharing your perspective on the, different geographical perspectives on the folk tales in Roman, and another one I missed your words. So, I was wondering whether it's about the domination of the spreads of the images of folk tales in the world, and if sessions like this is continued, we can share the folk tales from different geographical locations, so that the images of the mythologies and also the folk tales from around the world can be compared. Could be different, yeah. One symbol in each geographical location will be different from the other ones. Okay, thank you, Hilary, for sharing your perspective. Charlotte, would you like to share anything? If you have.
Yes, so I'm also incredibly interested in myth and folklore and how those tales, how those figures have been creatively transmogrified, if you like, in contemporary writing especially. So on my module on decolonizing literature, I teach such reimaginings of myth by a Black British author, a woman called Bolu Babalola. She published a collection of short stories in 2020 called Love in Colour, which presents a number of myths and tales from across the globe, some from Nigeria, which is the background of Bolu Babalola, but also from the Far East and elsewhere. And these are incredibly interesting to study because Bolu Babalola wrote these retellings because she wanted to see what happened to the original stories when you put a woman of color at the center of those texts. And one of the things that she wanted to achieve by doing that was to represent women of color as worthy and deserving of love, because these are romantic stories, worthy and deserving of love, rather than simply being victims, which kind of chimes with what Hilary was saying about Madeline Miller's novel, which also deals with, the kind of silent perspective of a female character in the Odyssey who had also been presented as a victim. I'm also interested in other other myths from elsewhere, like, for example, Irish mythology and Irish folk tales, which I have written about in my research, because some of those tales have been recast as crime stories. And that's because as folk tales that deal with a period of history from before British colonization, before Christianity in many cases, these stories depict a crime scene which isn't the same kind of crime scene as you would see in a contemporary story, but that deals with Irish history and some of the inequalities and fascinating cultural details that can be found there. So yes, I totally agree that myth and folk tales are an incredibly rich area, and it's so important that we keep them alive, the original stories, and that we engage with how authors and how films, how plays, how contemporary culture might recast some of these stories to make them relevant for today's audiences.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much, Charlotte, for that. Different perspective from Charlotte is about retelling the folk tales in different perspective to be in line with the surroundings, with the modern eras that we are living at the moment. And we will open the second session for question and answer. Just 2 more, but hopefully that the question will be having a different topic, not anymore on folklore. Okay, siapa Pak Neri? Okay, yes, okay. One from that side, and will be the last one is from this side because he's been raising up his hands quite long. Okay, what's your name and what is the question?
Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
My name is Muhammad Alvin Fadla Zulfan. So I have a question for Mr. Alex.
Alex, okay. Yes.
So you explained that children literature can be a media to teach adults that have dementia and others, right? Yeah. So I want to ask, is there any other factor or essential inside of children literature that can help these adult people with such complication like that? Do you get the question? Okay, so yeah.
Are there any other factors? Sorry, did you say are there any other factors?
Yeah, or any other essentials maybe.
Oh, essentials.
Inside of children literature that can help these adult people with such complication like dementia.
Okay, I'll open up. I'm not entirely sure of the answer to that, except that because I think it's something that is under-researched, and the power of storytelling and children's literature, I think it links. I know Bu Ida has said, let's not go back to folklore because we've talked about folklore, but essentially it's the Aussie tradition that I think that it's the familiarity with which those adults, particularly those who are suffering cognitive impairments and possibly dementia, Alzheimer's, as I said earlier, often they will remember things childhood with much more clarity than anything immediate, and so I think it can be a very powerful means for, if not recovery, at least sort of stabilizing. It could be a very emotionally rewarding experience for them. And so I think it can be part of the toolkit, if you like, for practitioners, for carers working with people with dementia or those with cognitive disabilities or even children with special educational needs and disabilities. I can see Maria wanting to jump in here because it is, again, I think it's under-researched, and I would urge you, perhaps, I know you finished your thesis now, but maybe for the next topic, it may be something that you might want to look at. Maria.
Yeah, no, not quite under-researched.
Okay.
Yeah, so something really interesting when you're working with an older population and you want to improve their cognitive health is reminiscing. Okay, so you're going to have to look at the psychological literature on reminiscing. And what do you do when you reminisce? Well, you allow that older person to tell stories about what their youth was like, what their favorite pastimes might have been like. And I guess one reason why this is such a powerful tool to improve cognitive health and also well-being is they're able to use their long-term memory to bring things into their short-term memory. So they're keeping their brains active in the process. And of course, Pa Alex has already alluded to those warm, emotional feelings that you have when you recollect something from your youth or from earlier in life that has brought you a lot of joy. So that's the power of reminiscing when you're thinking about how stories might help an older population. Allow them to tell their own stories. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maria and also Alex. And this is the last question from our audience today.
Hello, my name is Del. My question is for Dr. Charlotte. Is she still online?
Yes, still, Dr. Charlotte is in.
My question is it comes from a section that I noticed in her presentation earlier that she didn't really talk about. And that's crime fiction either by or about queer people in the LGBTQ+.
Okay.
She didn't really elaborate or talk about it earlier, so I thought, did she have any recommendations about books about those types of crimes? Because in the real world, hate crimes against queer people are very real. So I thought maybe reading works about those crimes would be interesting material to learn from. That's all.
Okay, Dr. Charlotte, did you hear the question clearly? Yes. Okay.
I did.
Yeah. Okay. Please.
I did, and thank you for asking that question. I'm so happy to have the opportunity to address this particular issue. I may have skipped over it in my slides, but I very much both teach and research this material. So if you want to read my extended thoughts on representation of LGBTQ+ and transgender in the crime fiction genre, then my new book, Crime Fiction in the Age of Me Too, which is out in November, has 2 chapters on these issues. So it's a topic I feel very strongly about because within crime fiction generally, especially transgender characters have often been cast as either victims or more frequently as criminals, as aggressors. And I'm interested in how more contemporary works challenge some of these ideas and instead produce complex and productive and positive and empowering representations of LGBTQ+ and transgender identities.
I'm sorry.
So,
could you repeat the title of the book again? I didn't catch it.
Yes. So my book is called Crime Fiction in the Age of Me Too. And it's coming out in November. In the Age of Me Too. So you also asked me to recommend you some authors and I'm happy to do that. So one of the authors I mentioned in my talk, Nikisa Afia, and her novel Dead Girls, is also an LGBTQ plus novel because the author herself identifies as queer. She's a woman of color, and her protagonist and lover in the narrative are both women of color who identify as queer. So there's also a queer love story at the heart of that crime novel. And the novel shows how, against that historical background of the 1920s in America, how these two women of color are able to live their best lives and have their love story in a really very hostile, racially hostile situation. I also teach a novel by a trans author called Dharma Kelleher. She's a trans woman herself, and writes from the perspective of transgender characters. And she has written a number of different characters and stories. And she speaks very interestingly about how important it is for her to depict trans characters, especially in America, where President Trump and other politicians have created such a hostile atmosphere towards trans representation. Kelleher is additionally very interesting because she mentioned how difficult it was for her to get published by mainstream publishing houses because she had transgender characters, and she had to set up her own publishing company in order to not have to compromise her vision in her work. So yes, it is an area that I'm very, very interested in and have researched extensively. So if you want to know more about these topics, I'm more than happy to answer other questions or for you to contact me. But I also refer you to the book that I'll be publishing very soon. But thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you as well for answering my question.
Thank you, Del. Thank you, Charlotte. Yes. Yeah, just put it there. It's okay. Just put it there. Okay. Thank you. That's great. I'm so sorry for the rest of the students and also audience who have already raised hands, but the time is very limited for us. So because it's now 5:15 p.m. in Jakarta time, and I think it's still morning in UK time. So I'd like to thank you very much to all of the speakers today, Dr. Alex and Ibu Maria, and also Professor Aran and Helen, and also Ibu Hillary, and also Ibu Charlotte, that have already shared their knowledge and also perspectives. They bring the world literature in our room today with the different practice in psychology, in children education, childhood education, and also in politics, representation, ecology. So many perspectives today that we learned from all of the speakers, but also they remind us on our job, as the young generation, to bring our identity, our folklore, our stories to the world. So Maria is not from Indonesia. Maria is from Philippines, living in the UK, but it seems that she knows more about our folklores than the rest of us here, especially on the behind the scene of the Gundul Pacul. I trust that I don't think that 100% in the class in this room understands the behind of the story of the Gundul Pacul before Maria presented the PowerPoint, right? So thank you very much, Ibu Maria, for opening up our eyes that we have to wake up, that other people are really, interested in our folklore. So why don't we? So after this, we have to be proud of your own identity and then introduce that to the world. Okay, by saying that, I will rest my case and give it back to the Master of Ceremony today. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hillary and also Charlotte, thank you very much, yeah, for joining us. Okay.
All right, thank you, Guido, for guiding us to a very insightful session today. And also, I would like to express our heartfelt thanks to our distinguished guests, Mr. Alex, Mrs. Maria, Mr. Alan Stevie, Mrs. Helen Moore, Mrs. Charlotte Taylor, and Mrs. Hilary Wicks. And now we come to a presentation session, and we would like to invite the head of English Literature Department of Universitas Ahmad Dahlan, Bapak Maftukin M. Hum, to present a souvenir or a little things to remember to our representative of guest lecturer. So to Mrs. Maria and Mr. Alex, please come forward. Yay! Yay! Alright, terima kasih Mr. Alex and Mrs. Maria. And today, right now, we proceed to another session, which is the group photo. So please, to everyone, take position. Okay. So the first session will be using this background, and the second session with the participant. In my count, 3, 2, 1. Teman-teman boleh berdiri. Okay. All right, distinguished guests and all participants, before we proceed to the closing, I would like to express our heartfelt thanks for your active participation. And before we part, please accept this verse from us. Ini ya, nggak afdal kalau nggak ada pantun kalau di Indonesia. So this is like rhyme verse from Indonesia. Berangkat kuliah ke UAB naik sepeda. Pulangnya tak lupa mampir ke Adi Boga. Semoga acara ini bisa berguna bagi teman-teman semua. Sampai jumpa di Notion Confab selanjutnya. Alright. Until we meet again, may all of you have a safe journey home. I am Rizky Aida signing off. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.